Getting a Japanese car to 500,000 miles is usually about staying ahead of the small, specific problems that quietly age these cars faster than they should. In this video, I'm going to show you the maintenance habits and overlooked details that actually make the difference long-term. Let's begin. Number 1. Replace the PCV valve. One of the cheapest parts on the engine can quietly create a whole chain of annoying problems if you leave it alone too long. I'm talking about the PCV valve. Most owners never think about it because the car still runs, still starts, and still drives. But once that valve starts sticking, pressure builds where it shouldn't. Oil vapor stops being managed properly, and that's when you start seeing the stuff people blame on age. Small oil leaks, rougher idle, oil smell, dirty throttle bodies, sludge buildup, and engines that just stop feeling clean. This matters a lot on Japanese cars people want to keep forever, especially high-mileage Corollas, Camrys, Civics, Accords, CR-Vs, and older Lexus sedans that are otherwise still mechanically solid. I've seen owners spend real money chasing valve cover leaks, oily intake mess, and weird breathing-related symptoms, when the smarter move would have been replacing a cheap PCV valve much earlier and keeping the whole system cleaner. The reason I like this tip so much is because it is preventive in the best way. You are not waiting for a failure. You are cutting off one of those low-cost, high-consequence problems before it starts making the engine dirtier than it needs to be. On some engines, that valve is a quick job. On others, it takes a little more effort. Either way, it is still cheap compared with the mess it helps avoid. A lot of people want 300,000 or 500,000 miles out of a Japanese engine while ignoring the little systems that keep crankcase pressure and oil vapor under control. That is backwards. The big stuff survives longer when the small stuff is not being neglected. This is exactly the kind of part smart long-term owners replace before the car gives them a reason. Number 2. Clean the throttle body. A lot of Japanese cars do not suddenly develop a bad idle because the engine is getting old. They develop it because the throttle body gets dirty slowly, the airflow stops behaving as cleanly as it used to, and the owner waits until the car starts stumbling, hunting, or shaking at stoplights before doing anything about it. That is the wrong time to think about it. By then, the car has already spent months running less cleanly than it should have. You see this a lot on commuter cars that do short trips, sit in traffic, and live on inconsistent fuel and delayed maintenance. The owner starts noticing a rough idle in drive, a weak-feeling start, or that little hesitation when pulling away from a light. Then they start guessing. Bad fuel, bad plugs, maybe a sensor. Sometimes the real fix is a throttle body that just needed cleaning before the buildup got bad enough to affect the way the car breathes at low speed. This is one of those jobs people ignore because the engine still basically works. But if the goal is huge mileage without major repairs, you should care about how the car behaves before it gets to the point of symptoms. A cleaned throttle body helps the engine settle into idle more smoothly, keeps response more consistent, and stops that slow slide into annoying drivability complaints. I remember a high-mileage daily driver that came in with a complaint so vague it almost sounded useless. The car just feels less happy at stoplights. That is exactly how these things start. Nothing dramatic, just less clean, less stable, less sharp than it used to be. Clean the throttle body early, and a lot of that slow deterioration never gets the chance to settle in. This is not flashy advice. It is just one of those small maintenance habits that separates cars that age well from cars that slowly become irritating. Number 3. Flush differential and transfer case fluids. This is where a lot of owners ruin otherwise strong Japanese drivetrains. They stay on top of engine oil, maybe transmission service too, and then completely ignore the differential and transfer case fluids until something starts humming, binding, or feeling expensive. That is a terrible strategy if the plan is 500,000 miles. On AWD and 4WD Japanese vehicles, these fluids matter far more than people act like they do. The scary part is that the damage usually builds quietly. No dramatic warning light, no sudden breakdown. Just heat, worn fluid, contaminated oil, and gears or bearings living a harder life every month than they should. I have seen owners baby the engine on a Highlander, 4Runner, Ray V4 AWD, Subaru Outback, or Forester, then act shocked when drivetrain noise shows up from components they never serviced once. And the manufacturers themselves make it clear these fluids are not magic lifetime liquids. Toyota's maintenance guides call for replacing transfer case and differential oil under special operating conditions like towing or off-road use, and Subaru's maintenance literature includes differential gear oil inspection in its schedules. That is the whole point. You do not wait for a rear diff to start singing or a transfer case to start feeling rough. By then, the cheap fluid service opportunity is gone, and now you are pricing actual hardware. Compared with drivetrain parts, gear oil is basically free. People love talking about engines that last forever, but the cars that reach insane mileage usually have something else in common. Somebody paid attention to the driveline before it started asking for money. That is one of the least glamorous habits on this list, and one of the most important. Number 4. Clean the drain channels before water starts living in the car. One of the dumbest ways to ruin a long-life Japanese car is to let water start living inside it. Not because of a crash, not because the car is junk, but because the drain channels fill up with leaves, dirt, pollen, and road filth until the water has nowhere to go. That is when owners start seeing the weird stuff. Fogged up windows every morning, a damp smell that never leaves, wet carpet under the mats, moisture in the spare wheel well, or random electrical issues that make no sense at first. A month ago, a guy brought me a 2017 Subaru Outback because the cabin kept smelling musty and the rear carpet was damp after rain. He thought the car had some major hidden leak. It didn't. The drain areas were blocked, water had been backing up, and now the interior was starting to pay for it. By the time you clean that mess properly, dry the interior, and deal with the trim and labor, you can easily turn a stupid maintenance oversight into a €300 to €900 problem. That is why this matters if you want huge mileage. Water does not just make the car smell bad, it starts attacking the parts owners do not think about. Wiring, insulation, connectors, clips, seat rails, metal under the carpet. The engine can still be perfect while the car itself starts aging like trash from the inside out. This is not a glamorous tip, but it is a real one. If the car has a sunroof, hatch drains, cowl drains, or door drains, keep them clear before water becomes part of the vehicle. That is exactly the kind of boring maintenance that keeps a Japanese car alive long after other people start calling theirs old. Number 5. Lubricate caliper slide pins. A lot of owners replace pads and rotors and think the brake job is finished. Then, 6 months later, one wheel is hotter than the others, one pad is wearing faster, the car does not coast right, and fuel economy is quietly getting worse. The reason is often not the pads. It is the caliper slide pins. If those pins dry out or start sticking, the brake cannot release and move the way it should. Now the pad drags, the rotor cooks, and the whole system wears out faster than it should. I had a 2015 Camry in not long ago where the owner thought he had bought low-quality pads because the front brakes were wearing unevenly again. The real problem was the hardware. The pins were dry, sticky, and moving badly. He had already spent money once on pads he did not need yet, and if he had kept driving it that way, the next bill would have been rotors, another pad set, and maybe a caliper. Easy €400 to €700 territory from something that should have been handled much earlier with grease and a proper brake service. This is one of those things that separates people who get 180,000 miles out of a car from people who push one to ridiculous mileage. They do not just replace what is worn, they keep the system moving the way it was supposed to move in the first place. And the scary part is how quiet this problem can be at first. No giant warning light, no dramatic failure, just one brake slowly dragging itself into a bigger bill. If you want a Japanese daily driver to stay efficient, smooth, and cheap to run, this is not optional maintenance. It is exactly the kind of detail that keeps the rest of the car from aging harder than it should. Number 6. Replace engine and transmission mounts before they tear everything else up. Some cars do not get old, they just get ignored. And worn engine and transmission mounts are one of the best examples. The owner feels more vibration at idle, a bigger thump dropping into drive, more shake through the wheel, maybe a rougher takeoff, and shrugs it off because the car still moves. That is the mistake. Mounts do not just affect comfort, they change the way the whole drivetrain loads the rest of the car. I had a customer with a high-mileage Honda Accord who was convinced the transmission was starting to die because the car felt harsh every time he shifted into gear and the cabin buzzed badly at idle. The gearbox was not the real story. The mounts were tired enough that the whole drivetrain was moving more than it should. By the time we priced the mount job, the number was nowhere near as ugly as what he had feared. Roughly €600 to €1,100 depending on which mounts were used, but if he had left it longer, the extra movement would have kept stressing the exhaust flex section, axles, and the rest of the driveline. That is why this matters for long-term ownership. Bad mounts make a strong car feel weak. They make a good transmission feel rough. They make a well-kept Japanese car feel older than it really is, and once owners get used to that degraded feeling, they start blaming the wrong systems. If you are trying to get massive mileage out of a car, you do not wait until the drivetrain is slamming around and everything feels sloppy. You replace the mounts while the problem is still most number 7. Wash the undercarriage properly. A Japanese car can still have a strong engine at 250,000 miles and be halfway dead underneath. That is the part a lot of owners miss. They wash the paint, clean the wheels, vacuum the interior, and never think about what is happening under the car where the real long-term damage builds. Subframes, brake lines, fuel lines, suspension bolts, exhaust hangers, control arm hardware, underbody seams. If you drive through winter salt, coastal humidity, mud, or dirty roads and you never wash underneath, you are asking the car to rot from the least visible side. This matters a lot more than people think on otherwise durable Japanese cars. I have seen older 4Runners, Outbacks, CR-Vs, and Corollas that still ran beautifully, but underneath they were becoming nasty to work on. Seized bolts, flaky lines, rusted brackets, exhaust hardware that turned every simple job into extra labor. That is where ownership cost starts changing. A repair that should have been straightforward suddenly becomes slower, uglier, and more expensive because the underside has been neglected for years, and the money difference is real. A proper underbody wash costs almost nothing if you do it yourself or add it occasionally at a wash bay. Compare that with the first time a simple suspension job turns into a fight with corroded fasteners, or brake line work gets bigger because everything underneath is crusted up. That is how people turn small jobs into 300 euros, 600 euros, 1,000 euros headaches for no good reason. If you want massive mileage out of a Japanese car, stop thinking only about the engine bay. Some cars do not die because the motor gives up. They die because the bottom half of the vehicle gets old, rusty, and miserable long before the drivetrain is finished. Number 8. Rotate tires religiously on AWD cars. There are people who spend years babying the engine and transmission on an AWD Japanese car while quietly abusing the one thing that ties the whole drivetrain together: the tires. That is insane. On AWD vehicles, tire rotation is not just about getting even wear or squeezing extra life out of a set. It is about keeping the rolling diameter as close as possible across all 4 corners, so the system is not constantly compensating for differences it should not be seeing. That is where the expensive mistakes start. One owner replaces only 2 tires because the fronts wore faster. Another ignores the rotation schedule for 20,000 miles. Another buys mismatched tread because the difference looked small. On a front-wheel drive car, that is already lazy. On AWD, it is worse. You start creating unnecessary stress for the center coupling, differential, transfer hardware, and the whole logic of a system designed around balance. Subaru owners should understand this better than anyone, but it applies way beyond Subaru. RAV4, AW'd, CR-V-Odd, CX-5-Odd, Highlander-Odd. If the tires are not wearing evenly, the drivetrain is living a harder life than it should. That is exactly why careful owners rotate consistently and replace intelligently. Not because they are obsessive, but because they understand that a tire problem can become a drivetrain problem if you let it. And this is such an easy win. Tire rotation is cheap. Sometimes it is bundled into basic service. Sometimes it costs less than dinner. Compare that with what happens if the car starts binding, humming, or feeling wrong because the AWD system has been living with uneven rolling resistance for too long. This is one of those maintenance habits that sounds boring until you look at the bill it helps you avoid. Number 9. Fix small oil leaks early. One of the worst ownership habits I see is treating a small oil leak like it is a cosmetic issue. It is not. The owner notices a little seep around the valve cover, a damp area near the timing side, a bit of oil collecting lower down the block, and because the car is not leaving huge puddles, the repair gets delayed for months or years. That is how a cheap gasket job turns into a mess affecting half the front of the engine bay. Oil never stays where it starts. It works its way onto rubber, belts, hoses, mounts, connectors, alternators, and plastic covers. Then the owner comes in for something unrelated, and you find the actual problem sitting in front of you. A soaked lower mount, a belt contaminated with oil, grime packed around pulleys, or an alternator living in a dirty, oily environment it never should have seen. Now the bill is no longer about one seal. It is about everything that leak has been touching. That is why I hate hearing, "It's just a tiny leak." On older Honda K-Series, Toyota 4-cylinders, Lexus V6S, and a lot of high-mileage Japanese engines, the small leaks are exactly the ones that should be handled before they start creating secondary damage. A simple valve cover gasket job might sit in the low hundreds. Ignore it long enough and now you are pricing the gasket, labor, cleanup, maybe plug tube seals, maybe an accessory belt, maybe more. The difference in cost is not subtle. If the goal is 500,000 miles without major repairs, you do not let oil leaks become background scenery. You treat them like contamination problems, because that is what they are. Number 10. Replace serpentine belts and tensioners. A lot of owners wait for the noise. Big mistake. By the time a serpentine belt starts chirping, squealing, or flapping around enough for you to hear it regularly, the system has usually been aging badly for a while. The belt is only part of it. The tensioner, idler pulleys, and general accessory drive condition matter too. If you only react when it starts making sound, you are already late. This matters because the accessory drive is one of those systems that never gets any respect until it fails at the worst possible time. The car loses charging. The water pump stops being driven on certain setups, steering assistance changes depending on the model, or the owner gets stranded by something they could have prevented with one basic maintenance move. And on high-mileage Japanese cars, the difference between changing the belt system proactively and waiting for drama is often the difference between a controlled service and an ugly roadside story. There's also a feel to these cars when the belt drive is healthy. The cold starts are cleaner. The engine sounds calmer. You do not get that tired chirp on damp mornings or the little noises owners brush off for months. A worn tensioner can make a decent engine sound more tired than it really is, and that changes how people judge the whole car. A belt and tensioner service is nowhere near exciting, but it is exactly the kind of thing long-term owners stay ahead of. Spend the money while the system is still behaving predictably, and it stays a maintenance job. Wait until the noise becomes your reminder system, and now you are gambling on timing, inconvenience, and whatever else gets dragged into the failure. That is not how cars reach ridiculous mileage.